Imagine sitting in a crowded theater, the credits roll, and you realize the scariest thing in the room isn't on the screen. These are 3 chilling real movie theater horror stories you must watch. True first-person encounters from small, dim auditoriums where ordinary nights became the kind of memory that never quite lets you sleep. A quick warning before we start. These stories include stalking, hiding, and invasive behavior. Nothing graphic, but they're disturbing. If you like true scare stories, consider liking and subscribing so you don't miss more like this. Story 1. April Night, My Little Brother, and a Man Who Kept Moving. It was April 2015. My girlfriend and I took my 9-year-old little brother to see It Follows on a slow weeknight at a tiny neighborhood cinema. The place still smelled like old carpet and buttered popcorn. We picked seats in the upper middle, leaving an empty aisle and a couple of rows between us and anyone else, just the way you do when you bring a kid to a horror movie. In the top left corner of the theater sat a lone man in a dark grey hoodie. He didn't do anything at first. He was just there, a shadow against the exit sign. About 5 minutes into the movie, I noticed he'd changed seats. He had moved down 1 row. I told myself it was nothing. People shift around. The film rolled over the soundtrack, and the glow of the screen painted everything in blue. But then 5 minutes later, another shift, row by row, not toward the doors, not toward the screen. Toward us. My stomach dropped each time I checked the aisle light and counted the rows between us and him. I remember the sound of my brother opening his pack of gummies, the crinkle loud in that hush. I remember the disposable cup rattling when my girlfriend nudged me and hissed, "Do you see him?" I tried to be calm. I told myself I was being paranoid. Looking back, I think I was trying to buy myself time. Time to decide what the right move was, while the man kept erasing that distance. Every 5 minutes, move. 5 minutes, move. It became its own drumbeat under the score of the movie. I felt watched in a way that nothing, no jump scare on screen, could mimic. I stayed put because I was, at that moment, the kind of coward who stays and watches a bad situation, hope it resolves itself. My brother was 9. That thought pushed and pulled. Leave and risk making a scene. Stay and risk whatever this man was planning. Halfway through, my brother said he needed to use the bathroom. I told him to take our time, to go with the person at the front. My girlfriend offered to go, but he insisted on being brave and going alone. He ran off with the small, confident stride kids have. I watched him go down the aisle into the darker part of the lobby. I thought, stupidly, that this would make the man go back. The man didn't sit still anymore. He moved again, but this time he didn't go closer to us. He stood up and left the row, not toward the lobby, toward the men's restroom. I followed, heart tight. The hallway smelled like floor cleaner and stale popcorn. The restroom was half lit. Doors swung closed, the echo of footsteps on tile. I rounded the corner and saw him. He was on his knees, hands braced on the tile, peering under stall doors. He was looking into the stalls, the way someone looks into a tiny, dark window, searching. There was relief that my brother had used the other bathroom, relief so sharp it stung. Relief wrapped immediately into anger and fear. I yelled for the man to stop. I don't remember what words I used, probably a string of, "Hey, get up!" The kind of words that sound braver shouted in a panic than they feel inside your mouth. He scrambled up and fled into the hallway. The staff at the front desk were shocked when we told them. They pulled the security footage, which showed him pacing in the hall and leaving in a coat that hid his face. The police were called. A report was filed. The footage showed his shadow in the corridor, but it never showed where he went after he left the building. He was never identified. After that night, every theater felt different. I felt guilty for letting him go into that bathroom at all, guilty for not following my brother immediately, guilty for not tackling him in the hall. those should-haves play on repeat. But there was gratitude too, raw relief that an awful thing didn't happen. I still remember the small, ordinary sounds, the child's chatter, the rustle of a candy wrapper, the projector's hum. They're now clipped into the memory of someone kneeling on cold tile, looking under a stall, and then disappearing. What would you have done if your kid had walked toward those doors alone? Would you have followed sooner? What's worse, making a scene and possibly escalating, or staying quiet and hoping for the best? Story 2. A private screening of fear. A few years after that, I went alone to see Cloverfield on a slow Wednesday afternoon. The theatre felt abandoned. Rows of empty seats, the concession stand dim, the ticket taker across the lobby distracted. I always prefer an aisle seat when I'm by myself. The sense of escape. I picked one 2/3 back. The film began. The lights went down. There's a strange comfort in being small in a big dark room, anonymous, but safe. About 20 minutes in, I heard whispering. At first, I thought it was coming from the aisle behind me, the soft, indecipherable kind that's usually someone sharing a joke. I turned mid-sentence toward the muffled sound, but there was no one leaning, no one shifting. The whispering continued, louder now, as if someone had leaned forward to speak directly into the space behind me. I froze. My skin prickled. I told myself it might be the HVAC unit or the film's sound bleeding, but the pattern was wrong. The whispers were deliberate, too human. Then I saw a figure 2 rows up. They weren't slouching, hunched, or moving in that casual way a tired viewer does. They were rigid, arms straight down at their sides, like a doll propped to stare. They didn't fidget, didn't whisper again. They just sat, staring. I could feel their eyes on the back of my head, cold and deliberate. The claustrophobia hit then. My breath was too loud in my ears. I left my seat so abruptly the crunch of my shoes sounded amplified in the empty space. I went to the lobby. No staff. Lights on low. No one at the counter. I checked the ticket booth. Empty. My phone had 1 bar, and I called the theater's number. No one answered. I remember running to my car with my keys like a talisman and driving away, heart pounding, as if the figure might be standing at my window when I looked up. There was no cop involved. There was no footage. There was only the memory of a stiff presence and the echo of whispering that could have been in my head. It's the kind of encounter that doesn't leave a trail. It leaves a mark on you. You keep replaying the moment you turned and didn't see a face, and you wonder if what you heard was real at all. Did they mean to scare me or to watch? I still don't know. Have you ever felt watched in a place full of strangers and realized there was no one to report it to? That feeling of having to become your own witness is what stays with you. Story 3. Working the night shift and a hiding place no one should find. My first job was at that Long Island theater you always hear about on local boards. I was 19, nights and weekends, learning to make exact change and wrap reheated hot dogs in paper. Kathy worked the counter with me. She was older, efficient, sharp in the way of people who had done this long enough to read the room from the popcorn line. Most nights we were alone together. By closing, the lights were dim, and the building felt like a skeleton, eerie but manageable. One late shift, an older man came in as we were locking doors. He paid cash for a ticket, lingered by the lobby, watched us with the kind of gaze that doesn't belong to an ordinary patron. He was odd in little ways, too interested in our routine, too fixed on the young staffers. I tried to ignore him. Kathy handled him with that practiced politeness. Smile, hand the ticket, keep conversations strictly transactional. He left after the last showing, or so it seemed. A few minutes later, I was sent to the storage room to fetch some cleaning supplies. The storeroom is this narrow, hot space behind the screens where the boilers live and the old furniture goes. The light was a single bulb swinging, and the sound was the distant murmur of credits and the hum of the HVAC. As I pulled open a rusted closet door, I saw a sleeve disappear behind the boiler. Not a twitch, more like a trained motion, quick and practiced. For a second my brain offered explanations. Coat on hangers, old mannequin, a pile of rags. Then I saw a hand, a plain human hand tucked there, fingers curled over an old metal pipe. I could feel the color drain out of my face. I stood there a beat too long, thinking about how stupid and small I was feeling, thinking about leaving and calling someone and running and what Kathy would say. The hand slid back. I backed out and told Kathy what I'd seen in the most composed way I could manage, which is to say, I blurted it, and then hated myself for the hysterical edge in my voice. We checked the security footage. The camera showed the man who'd been in the lobby earlier, wandering the hallways, peeking into the auditorium doors, then slipping toward the back, the frame catching his shadow near the storage door. It wasn't cinematic, it was grainy, and his face was half hidden, but the footage showed someone leaving. Calm, unhurried, coat pulled tight. Kathy's face changed when she saw the tape. She stepped away from the counter, and for a moment I thought she was going to apologize for letting him in. Instead, she went behind the register and dialed a number I didn't recognize. She listened on the other end, and then she said the one word that made the air in the lobby feel older. "He's here." She explained the situation, then hung up. I asked what was going on. She hesitated and then said quietly that the man had been in contact before. He was her ex-husband. I don't know the whole history. I don't know what they fought or when they split or what he hoped to do that night. She sounded tired and scared in a way that wasn't showy. She called the police. Not long after, uniforms arrived and an older man was taken into custody down by the curb. I watched through the glass as someone in a jacket was led to a squad car, the way a story closes with a thud and a policeman's flashlight. Kathy stopped showing up for shifts after that. People said she moved away. I never learned anything more than what I'd seen: a hand behind a boiler, a man on tape, a phone call that connected a face in our lobby to someone we knew enough to call ex-husband. There was a resolution of sorts. Someone was detained. But the emotion that stayed wasn't closure. It was the eerie certainty that someone had chosen a boiler as a hiding spot in a place where people come to forget about fear for a couple of hours. When you work late and you're young, you learn how the building breathes at night. You learn which doors stick, where shadows pool, how the projector drops a light that looks like an eye. That night, every little detail turned into proof that the world can fold in on the safe places you assume you know. These three stories are connected not by their endings, but by the way they begin: ordinary plans, small choices, the assumption of safety, and then twist into something you can't just shrug off. In each case, the escalation started with a small, odd behavior, a seat change, a whisper, a hand slipped behind a boiler. Those tiny things were the warning signs that, in the moment, we either didn't understand or tried to rationalize away. There's a guilt that follows, too, the quiet regrets. I felt it for not following my brother sooner that April night. I felt it for choosing to flee alone in the Cloverfield screening, abandoning any chance to ask questions. I felt it for the way Kathy vanished after that shift, leaving me to keep the lights on in a place that suddenly felt less like a job and more like a crime scene. But the guilt sits beside another feeling: gratitude that we walked out, that the worst possible turn didn't happen, that small mercies disguised as luck held. I'm not telling these stories to scare you into paranoia. I'm telling them because they happened in places many of us take for granted, public spaces where you shouldn't have to be your own security detail. They're reminders to trust your instincts, to notice patterns, and to speak up when something feels wrong. But they're also reminders of how complicated real moments are. There's no neat manual that says what the right move is, no single heroic choice that fixes everything. If you've ever had a creepy theater encounter or spotted something that made your skin crawl in a public place, tell it in the comments. I want to hear how you handled it, what you wish you'd done differently, what you did that helped. And if you want more true horror stories like these, subscribe and hit the bell. There are more nights like these waiting to be told. One final thought before you go to your next movie. The screen can show you monsters and heroes and endings. But sometimes the scariest moments are the ones that happen in the dark between rows, in the small quiet places no camera catches. Keep your eyes open. Keep your people close. And when the credits roll, remember that the theater's lights can come up on many kinds of endings, some wrapped in an explanation, some that leave you staring at a grainy image of a hallway and wondering who was there and why they moved row by row until they were too close.